Jesus, you're on.
So thank you very much for inviting me. I am Jesus Orrantia, as Maggie had said. I am the Community Engagement Specialist within Denver Parks and Recreation. And I'll describe as I do the presentation what that means and what that covers. My particular position is within the marketing and communication team of Parks and Recreation. So there are multiple people that do community engagement in other departments. Their structure might be slightly different. We fall into the marketing and communications, and that's where we're located. We recently got in with partnerships. So partnerships joined our team that helps us grow out what we do when we start outreaching for different public events and the like. It's also important to note that although I've only been with the department since November of 2019, so most of my time has been remote while I've been with the department. I am familiar with INC as I worked with Councilman Paul Lopez for about 10 years in West Denver in District 3, and then was part of the transitions team for Councilwoman Torres as she moved into that position. So I am familiar with the city. I am familiar with the registered neighborhood organizations and INC. Councilman Lopez was a big supporter of INC. I think would attend the annual event in early January or first quarter, and really be part of this organization to to support the RNOs at the community neighborhood level. Just to give you some background, that I am familiar with the entity and the work that you all are doing and have done previously. And with that, I will share my screen. I will go through these fairly quickly, but you all should feel free to ask any questions. I don't know how you normally handle questions, if it's raising hands or anything like that, but I'm happy to take the questions as you all see fit.
And I will share with you, we generally ask people to mute so that everyone can hear really well. And at the end of your presentation, then we look at it, open it to questions. So feel free to, if you feel like there's a place you would like to stop and get some input, that would be up to you. But generally, we wait until they finished.
Okay. So what I will probably do is, Cindy had asked us for two different things, and she had mentioned it a little earlier. I'll talk more about the engagement piece, and then I will stop at the end of this presentation to take any questions. She had also asked about capital improvements. Now CIP, as you may hear it called, that's something that our planning division does. And so we're not the expert. I could give a very general outline, and I do have a document of how they do their process, but any specific questions would be hard for me to answer since that's not something we directly get involved with. Okay. So again, as the marketing and communications team, we do several things. We do all the communication, both social media and any type of media for Denver Parks and Recreation. This means we do work with other departments, so that give me a second because my family just got here and my dog is going crazy to say hello. So give me 1 second while I open the door. Apologies for that. Once the girls get home, she wants to welcome them home. And so again, in our team, we have a media specialist, a webmaster, social media specialist. someone that works on all the graphics, actually two people that will work on graphics and a lot of what comes out, both for parks invites, recreation, flyers, things like that. You have two engagement specialists. So some of you may remember Laura Morales. She has actually rejoined our team after being out for a little under a year. She was able to rejoin our team in August of last year and is now considered my counterpart. So we're working on how to do that and then kind of just support all the divisions of Parks and Recreation. So how do we do that? We have what's called the Pecan Policy, for short, the Public Engagement Community and Notifications Policy. This is something that you could find online. If you go to denvergov.org/parks and recreation, look under Parks Policies, and you'll be able to see the Pecan Policy. It is slightly outdated, but it's something that we still use to see, the engagement and the level of engagement that we're going to do. You also will see in more detail kind of what we see when we want to engage. So tier 1 projects are the large, big projects that will have a citywide impact. And so what we really want is to cast a large net and be able to get as many people involved in that process as possible. And I'll go over the tools here in a second. So we meet with the project management team and talk about who are the stakeholders, who are the people we need to get involved, how do we get them involved, and then we start working on an outreach plan for that particular project, depending on the size and scope and what's needed. Tier 2, you're looking at smaller neighborhood parks, right? So let me take a step back. I know you all are very familiar with parks, but when we're talking regional parks, we're talking the city parks, Sloan's Lakes, Wash Parks, Central Park, even Civic Center Park, right? Probably the regional parks are parks that draw in crowds for attention or for events. And so size has a lot to do with it, but sometimes the amenities and the uses also would label it or have us think of it as a regional plan. So some of you may be familiar with the Civic Center 100, where we're now looking at what to do with Civic Center for the next 100 years. And it's a planning process that's going on right now. We're not limiting that just to that Civic Center neighborhood, because we know even if you don't live in that neighborhood, you take pride in Civic Center. You come down for events. You may come to see the city and county building, the Capitol, the public library. It's still a hub where people come, and it's a place where people take pride. So that is one of the large outreach efforts that we do. When we talk about tier 2, we're talking about more focused into the neighborhood planning. So smaller projects that may not have as big of city impact, but are still important to the people that would directly use the park on a day-to-day basis. So we use some of the similar tools, but maybe more focused instead of outreaching on the large net. And the final is a tier 3, which are the day-to-day operations of things that we have to do where outreach and engagement is minimal, and it's more about the outreach of just knowledge base and notifying the users of parks of something that may happen. So, there was a lot of notification during COVID because there were things where we just had to notify people, rec centers are closed, this is closed, this is what's allowed in the parks, this is what's not allowed in the parks. So just notifying people of what's happening, but really not engaging in getting a feedback of this should or should not be closed, but working with local officials on what that should be, right? So when trails close, sprinkler systems that are busted, things like that will be small notifications that we'll send out. So what are the outreach tools? And I'll talk to this in something that Cindy wanted to know, because we've been in a virtual world for a year now, and it has affected the way we do community engagement, right? So some of the tools we have are public meetings. Previously, we used to have public meetings in the neighborhood, in the community. For the past year, I can't think of one meeting that has been in person. They have all been virtual, and we've seen both the good and the bad that comes with that, right? Where we've seen an increase in people participating in the public meetings, but there's also a digital divide where in certain neighborhoods it's harder to draw people in because they may not be as comfortable with the internet, right? Whether it's because they don't have access to it, they're just not as comfortable with technology, and so there's this gap where we're seeing it. On when we do public meetings. We've continued to do public meetings since last year. We've held well over 25 meetings since the pandemic on a variety of projects throughout the city. Pop-up events is something that we also use quite successfully when we're able to. This is a way to get our park users to actually be at the park and be surprised by something that's in the park and engaging to them. So they would come and interact with staff on a planning effort. This, unfortunately, we have been unable to do. One thing that it has led us to do for during COVID is figure out how to reach out to those park users. So one thing you may have noticed, if there was a park project near you, or even if you happen to be at City Park for the strategic acquisition plan, was we began to put campaign signs to draw people where they could get information and engaged on those projects. Previously, Parks and Rec would not use those type of outreach efforts, or not use it often, but we began to hear from a lot of community members, you need a better analog way of communicating with people in the neighborhoods. So in a lot of neighborhoods, we began to print campaign signs. We're trying to standardize them so we could use them in multiple projects, so that we don't have to print up a new sign depending on whether it's a meeting, a survey, or just a different project, but something that could be used and reused. And it's something that we have seen great success in some of our neighborhoods. The other thing is surveys, and I do have another slide on surveys, so I'll get into more detail there. The important thing to know is the surveying we really use is online and intercepts. So online is clearly an online survey. Currently, there is only one online survey that's open, which is the Westwood Recreation Center. And then the intercept survey is when we actually have people trying to complete a survey in person. Because of COVID, we have scaled back on that. Most recently, we have done some of those outreach efforts in areas where we felt that we weren't reaching everyone in the community. So we're trying to pick that up again. Social media promotion, again, we use Facebook, Twitter, Nextdoor, Instagram. We have YouTube. So we do use the social media networks to get information out. R&O communications. So R&O communications in the Pecan Policy, depending on the tier, we go anywhere from 1 mile to 2 miles for R&O notifications. This includes any public meetings, any surveys that are out. We will send reminders. We will send some of the notifications we have on social media that can be shared. Generally, we'll put the flyers. And so we work with the project management team. The only place that this is slightly different is in downtown, because of the density of registered neighborhood organizations in the downtown sector. If we go 2 miles, you essentially capture the entire city. And sometimes their efforts a little more focused on residents of downtown. Um, but my understanding, and I should be corrected if I'm wrong, is INC covers the entire city and county of Denver. And so you all should be receiving those emails. They come from a general Parks and Rec email. It has the information. And so you all should receive that, whether you live in the neighborhood or not. And those do go to whoever the email is sent to. So all of you as members may be saying, I've never seen those emails. But it would be, for example, if it goes to Cindy or if it goes to Maggie, they would be the ones receiving that actual email. Stakeholder groups, we form stakeholder groups depending on the size of the project. Usually we work with council members to make sure that we get the people that are in the community that should be in there. We work with our Parks and Rec Advisory Board, PRAB, and so we go to meetings, we present to them, they have public hearings, city council, everything from briefings to the legislative work that we have to do with them. We share the information with them so that they could share out to the networks. Media outreach, which includes press releases, interviews, things like that, where we just need further outreach. The community organization outreach, so much more in-person community. We work with school, with businesses. As I had mentioned, partnership is now part of our team. So that helps us know who the city is directly partnering with. And then, of course, we have the Parks and Rec website. Those that are keen on denvergov.org noticed that there was a major renovation to the website in December. That did include Parks and Recreation. So some of the documents that you may have been used to finding quickly may be a little harder to search and find. Now, surveys is something that Cindy had asked us about. And as I mentioned, surveys is something that we had to change how we did during the during COVID, simply because that intercept survey or that in-person survey wasn't as accessible. Things that did help us to be able to do that was if we do an online survey, we just have a wider reach, right? And we're also reaching people that may have not been able to attend the public meeting. So those are things that have really helped us out on being able to do the outreach when we do surveying. One thing is the city as a whole doesn't have a standardized for the survey's results or survey questions, survey time of survey. And this is true for almost anyone in the city. And it's hard to be able to say every survey needs to be open X amount of time, because there are some surveys that are for small projects, really focused, where we may only want 2 or 3 weeks of input. And there are other surveys that might be open a lot longer, depending on the community, the languages we're using, the outreach efforts that we're doing in certain communities. So we don't have a standardized of how long surveys are, how long they're going to be open, or where they're going to reach out. We do try to use best practices and work with our planners on how to create the surveys and make sure that they're using the best practice. So asking a variety of questions, making sure that those questions work both in an online format and in a paper format in case people will be taking that. Making sure that the wording isn't biased or making it seem like the department is trying to guide someone into a certain answer. And so those are things that we look for as a department before putting out the survey. The thing we have standardized is demographic questions. So making sure that the questions on demographics are the same throughout all the survey. There is a small exception to this. When we're working out with playgrounds or things where we really want children's input, we do change the demographic information to make sure that we capture, and when we're working with schools, to capture those youth. Usually we go under 18 if we're working closely with a school, or if we're trying to capture that voice. We do go in under 13, and we may break that up for if we're working a little smaller. That's really the only exception. The rest of the demographic information we try to capture is the same. Now, one thing that is always concerning to residents, and this doesn't mean you should not take our survey, is there isn't a specific weight to the surveys in comparison to the meetings, in comparison to emails or comments that we might receive in other ways. What surveys really allow us to do is start putting context into things that we may have heard or the city has made assumptions about. And it starts providing that context. And so it's not something where the survey says X, so it has to be that. That's not necessarily how it's done. What the planners and project managers do is they begin to look at all the information that was gathered during the engagement process and see how it fits within the budget and other constraints that the whole department is working with, right? Other regulations that we may be looking to do. So if someone says, build a new playground along 8th Avenue, right? Well, that's a comment. And if that's a very popular comment and people are saying, yeah, because it's easy access. Well, but we also have to keep in mind that that's a dangerous place for a playground. It doesn't fit within the context of a certain park. So it's not simply saying so many people responded, but it gives us the additional information that we may not receive otherwise in other forms of outreach efforts. And so how can community members communicate with the department, right? I know it's always confusing, or it becomes complex because it's the city. And so residents sometimes either feel that they can't communicate or how to get their communication across. Even, I know it's not a popular answer, even with city council, the council members always recommended 311. And 311 is a good place to be able to capture aggregate information of what is happening. So in parks, a good place for doing this would be off-leash dogs. Whether you agree that dogs should be off-leash or they shouldn't, currently within the city and county of Denver, dogs must be on a leash when in public property. There are some parks where people are very respectful of this. There are other parks where people aren't as much. And then there are neighborhoods where people are comfortable with dogs being off leash, and there are other parts where people aren't being off leash. Our rangers are who would enforce that. And what they do is they look at the 311 records on where people are saying, hey, people are doing this, right? And that's where they would go enforce. So it really gives the aggregate information to be able to look at what are the hotspots of what's going on. If calling 311 is not something that you enjoy, use Pocket Gov, to be able to explain what's happening. Other things that you're able to do is email Parks and Recreation. The email address is parksandrecreation@denvergov.org. Someone is always checking that. So even if you don't know where to start, send an email to that and they will be directed to the correct person. Communicate with staff, right? So we have some of the most front-facing staff in the entire city. Our crews are in the parks. We have rec staff that works, that teaches classes, that is there a lot of days when rec centers are open. So, you should feel comfortable speaking with the staff. They may not have all the information, but they will have an understanding of what's happening within that area and within the park, or even be able to explain to you, these are the steps you would need to follow if there's something that you're asking for. Communicate with your city council representative, right? Making sure that they know of what the priorities are for your neighborhood and your organizations. Because when we work with city council, they take their information to be able to say, hey, we're also hearing from community members that this is a factor, this isn't as important. And so the city council really helps balance that. Engage with your PRAB members, right? Either by contacting them, going to public comment, or going to the committees, something that Cindy had brought up earlier. And just a quick rundown on PRAB. It's 19 community members appointed by city council and the mayor. They meet on the second Wednesday of every month. Currently, we are meeting virtually. Attend public meetings and open houses. So I know everyone's busy. I know there's a lot of meetings, and parks isn't the only thing that's happening within your lives. But if there's something that you're interested in, attend the meeting, attend the open house, tell your neighbors, tell your community to attend it, right? Request Parks and Recreation to attend community meetings. So similar to how Cindy reached out, asked us to attend community events when they're available, and complete and share the surveys, right? One thing that we noticed is that there are communities that are just very difficult to reach with the surveys, many in underserved neighborhoods, and that is a lot of the times where we may focus our efforts to make sure that we're also hearing from them, because a lot of the times they're the places where parks are most lacking. So that is all I have for this. I will take questions on engagement that you all might have. And then if there's time, I will just quickly go through the CIP process.
Okay, well, thank you very much. That was a good overview, and we appreciate that. Jesus, and I will look for hands on when I wrote you. What is your anticipation? What does Denver Parks and Rec anticipate using Zoom in the future when we can meet in person?
So that's something that the city as a whole is looking at. We have heard that a hybrid model is something that people would like to see, especially with PRAB. And so the city as a whole is going to provide some guidelines on how that should be done. And we will follow those guidelines to see if that hybrid model is what will work, and how we can make it effective when there are people in the room and people not in the room.
Okay, thank you. I want to take 1 minute now, Jesus, for people to introduce them to you. So I'm Cindy Johnstone, and my area, my park is Washington Park, and that's been very important to me as I've lived here for 30 years. I'm going to go up. You guys, how about this? You jump in, because if I unmute, like Greg.
Hi, Jesus. I am Greg Sorensen. I am with Friends and Neighbors for Cheeseman Park.
Thank you. David?
Hey, David Paylett. I'm with College View Neighborhood Association. Been here about 13 years. short timer in comparison.
Yeah, but you're younger. Okay. Jane.
Hi, Jesus. I met you last week at the Rosedale Harvard Gulch meeting when you came to explain about the new maintenance facility. It's good to see you again, and thanks for your great work.
Jay and Kathleen.
Hello. So good to, thank you very much for your presentation. We appreciate it. We're Claire out here in South Carolina
Oh, hi.
eating dinner, and we're
on Kiowa Island.
Kiowa Island, and we appreciate being able to tune in. Thank you, Maggie and Cindy, for continuing to do great work with Parks and Rec, with INC Park. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Katie.
Hold on.
There we are.
There we are. Katie Fisher and my husband, Steve Fisher, and we're in the university area, meaning the University of Denver, and we've lived in this area 40 years or more.
Ooh, okay.
Long time.
That's a long time. Okay, well, thank you for, and Maggie.
I'm Maggie
know-
Price. I live in the Congress Park area, close to Colfax. So I have the ability to have several parks that I enjoy very much. My primary park is City Park. It's a hike for me to go over to Congress Park. However, I do that. And also Cheeseman Park is close to me too. But my primary park is City Park.
You know, you're in a prime location because it sounds like you're probably also close to Carla Madison
I am.
Recreation Center. So
I am.
Right. Well, thank you. Thank you, everyone. And David, it's nice to have you at our meeting. I guess I'd like to open it up to other people who have maybe some questions about the communication, outreach, and engagement. Are there any questions that that was such a good overview or good presentation, Jesus, to let us know what the public engagement piece is.
I might step in here. I think it's important for us to be, being INC, to spread the word how the PRAB department grouping is doing things differently. That certainly we can still do public comments, but now they have these subgroups that are at on different nights or days or times. And that if we have as a citizen a concern, they're preferring more that we will start off in a PRAB subcommittee, and then it will get more vented and explored, and then it will come up to the full PRAB. And I think that has been a major change. They're still trying to get all the committees to act more in a uniform way. That they have a meeting coming up to get that concept out. But in the past, so many of us would just always come to public comment, and we certainly have seen. I'm not on PRAB, but I do attend every one of those that I can. And we still see a lot of frustrations in different groups, be it open parks to cars or closed parks to cars, the geese problem, off-leash dogs, you name it. And there are obviously citizens who want things vented out to these different groups. And then I think some people get very frustrated because during the public comment, you won't get answers. Once again, you're stating a problem, and I think they get very frustrated that PRAB can't immediately answer them or anything, but they do hear it. And PRAB really doesn't have the powers to change things. So I think there's a lot more that needs to be communicated to the citizens on where you will start to get an inroad into someone listening to you. And I think that's still one of our major problems. And as INC, I think we need to spread that out to our individual RNOs so they understand this, that it's not always deaf ears that are listening to you, but that there are new ways to maybe get that information. And like Jesus was saying, all these other ways too, that, you know, if you don't like dealing with INC, we do have ways to get back to people.
Yeah, and although there wasn't quite a question, Katie, I'll try to, you know, I'll try to respond to some of those concerns, and some of it has to do with PRAB always had committees, but many of them were ad hoc committees that would take on specific topics. So unless you were really in the know, it was really hard to understand. I really care about X topic. This is the committee I should go to, simply because there were anywhere between 10 and 13 committees at any given time. So last January, the PRAB began to try to really narrow down the focus of these committees so that they could focus on specific topics and be able to really go in there and ask the questions and have the department come and talk to them directly. And then they would come and tell the PRAB either through a small presentation, which are committee reports now, or they recommend that those departments go and do a full presentation. And so it's more an in-depth presentation where the PRAB members are able to ask questions of the department. We're still working out the kinks on how does it work, because they are a suggestive body and not necessarily the authorizing body of this is what you do, so complete it. Right? They give recommendations, and the reason we take recommendations from them is because they're so intimately familiar with Parks and Recreation. This is something they care about. This is something that they work towards, and it's something that they hear information about. They also do their own type of community engagement and outreach efforts with their networks and with their city council and appointee members. So sometimes they're bringing in the information and telling us the information on whether they want to take this or not. So those are the types of things where we hear the frustration, we understand the frustration, we're working out the kinks for those committees, so that not only are they more standardized for community members to understand how they work, where to go, but that they all act the same. Jane, I saw your hand up right before Katie, so I do want to be respectful and answer a question if you have one.
Oh, yeah, I do. Thanks. So I'm here at Rosedale Harvard Gulch, but I walk Washington Park a lot and some other parks a lot. And I'm just wondering, have you ever thought about putting up any kind of, temporary sign about a meeting that's coming up or an issue that's coming up in the park itself? I mean, I'm thinking of like a political sign that you could put up temporarily or something, so that people that are familiar with those parks but may not live close to them would get to know about what's being planned if there's a meeting or something.
And so I had mentioned that briefly in the presentation as something that really began because of COVID. Prior to myself joining Parks and Rec, the only other place where I saw that type of outreach effort was during the city loop at City Park, where on a couple occasions when I would go to the park, I would see just maybe like a little stand where you could fill something out really quick. But parks as a whole hasn't done that. Part of it has been if you put campaign signs, campaigns may think that it's something that they're able to do in right of way, so they may begin to do it. But because people were requesting more of that, especially during COVID, and we also saw park usage go up.
Oh, yeah.
You all are talking about some of the major regional parks in all of Parks and Recreation, in all of the Denver metro area. So you all saw how many people there were. So that's why we did put out signage, and that's something I think we're going to keep. It really depends on the project and how we're involving people and how effective it is. One thing I had mentioned is we're trying to standardize it so we have a batch and then use it depending on what it is that we need to outreach to.
I also walk Ruby Hill a lot. I love that park too.
Yes, Ruby Hill is one that is constantly changing and just growing with amenities.
Yeah. Thank you.
No problem.
Anyone else have some questions?
Sure. Jesus, with the signage, I know
Could you try again?
Sorry, that was Siri.
Oh.
With the signage, I know that College View Neighborhood Association would be willing to help out in some fashion in putting the signs out and then taking them back up, something along that line so they wouldn't get tagged or stolen. The other thing is, do you know which department in the city is making the decision about how to handle ongoing meetings? I think Jay and Kathleen make a good point right there that they can sit in on the meeting from North Carolina, South Carolina, wherever they are. And personally, I would sit in a lot more INC meetings if I didn't have to drive to every one. So I would put some input if you know which department is making that decision.
So all of you I'm assuming are very civically engaged. So you all may recall that last year, Councilwoman Sawyer with Councilman Sedebaca proposed a change on how the city council is able to meet, because within charter, it states that city council must meet in person. And actually, those rules trickle down and affect all commissions, including the PRAB. And so part of what we need to figure out is what changes city council will do, how they will figure out what those public meetings can do. And then from there, it will probably be the mayor's office or their outreach that they have, being able to guide and say, these are things and best practices that you all need to do, because right now it's easy to hold a meeting because it's all virtual. But when we do the hybrid model, that's what will be the more difficult part. So I think we'll have to see what those guidelines come up with. I will let you know right now, as the PRAB, there isn't, this is the date we will start meeting in person. And so it is something that we will be working with them just to see how some of the logistics will work out.
Thank you.
I would like to do a follow on that, is that I think it's very important that all of these meetings be posted online, the PRAB meetings that you have, and they may be it now, and help me, are they being posted, the videos?
No, they don't.
Because I don't understand why they are not, in the sense that with doing Zoom, obviously they could be posted on the web and on your website, because again, with us all being very busy, I may not even be able to go to the Zoom meeting. Parks and Rec alone has meetings that overlap that I want to attend both. So those meetings that are that have general public information. I'm not talking about community meetings for a playground, but I am talking about, which is not a bad idea, but I am talking about anything that impacts or has information that's coming from different parts of the city. It would be important to have it online, and I hope that that will be in the future.
So part of the discussion that has happened with that is currently that is something that's available to us because of Zoom. In an in-person meeting, that part is not available. And we don't know if it's something that we could continue to commit to in the future. Previously, in-person meetings, what would happen is only the audio was recorded. And if someone wanted to hear the audio, they would contact our staff, which at this time is Arthur Gilkinson, and he would be able to provide that. The executive committee of PRAB has decided to keep that process even during Zoom. But again, that is something that we will continue to discuss and evolve as guidelines come out. The PRAB meetings are recorded. Again, to something Kate was talking about earlier, the committees may or may not be recorded. There is no standard on that. But for example, if there was a topic that you missed at PRAB, you could reach out to Arthur and simply ask for the video recording, similar to how previously you would be able to ask for the audio recording.
Okay. I hope that's discussed more.
Yeah.
Any other questions
Yes.
on?
Yeah.
Okay, Maggie.
Yeah, I do have a few things. One is I would like to suggest too that on these Zoom meetings that they also be broadcast via Facebook and also YouTube. That's a good possibility. It also provides a recording medium on another site as far as the YouTube videos that allows more people to be able to see it. Sadly, when people have reached out to Arthur to receive the audio, that just doesn't happen sometimes. So that has been a problem. The last time we were able to receive an audio was about 1.5 years ago. So I look forward to being able to have more, because that has been a real good thing for people to at least listen to it. Though oftentimes, like what you just presented us, which was excellent, and thank you very much, to be able to see a demonstration of what's going on is very, very important. What I've learned a lot with Zoom and other mediums, but I think Zoom is probably the best one, is that you have to orchestrate them almost like a theater event. You have to plan for it. And it would be possible, probably, to have a Zoom meeting that also has live people sitting in an audience, but still have it as a Zoom. And that's a suggestion I might make, is that to encourage having a large audience that could be viewed almost as an event, a theater event. It doesn't have to, things don't have to be just one person sitting in a little screen. And then other people could view it and take part in it if necessary. But those are just a few suggestions that I have had while thinking about this, because I think this Zoom thing has been incredible for people to be able to attend meetings. For you to come and join us, I think that's wonderful. I attend Lisa Calderon's monthly meeting, and that has been a wealth of information. So I really appreciate those things. I'm done.
Thank you. Thank you, Maggie.
Thank you, Maggie.
Okay, there's something went across my mind, but it's not. I am still a little confused about if you're the community engagement specialist. So if we wanted to know what is going on, not just one person, but in general, who would we go to? Is it better to go to like for outreach, planning, and management? I'm
Yeah.
sorry, but that was a little confusing to me. Was it to anybody else? It's sort of like not sure who you go to when you feel like perhaps the outreach is inadequate, or that the outreach isn't including comments. For example, survey data tells how many people answered certain questions, or their areas, but like comment other is extremely important. That creates conversation, as a matter of fact. But I don't see other comments in reports that are presented that I can see, up here on the screen. So I put two things together, and I'm sorry, but they do sort of relate.
I'll try to deconstruct those two things so I could try to have somewhat of an answer. Are you specifically speaking about the department or Parks and Recreation or the PRAB?
Oh, no, I'm talking about the department now. I'm talking about, thank you for the clarification.
Okay. So you're asking on certain engagement efforts or certain projects, community members may feel that the engagement was not adequate.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
So if that's the case, right, I think part of the discussion is what was not adequate about the engagement. What did we miss, right?
Mm-hmm.
And eventually with the outreach committee, or those are the things that we want. We want to make sure that the things that we do work, and they work for community members, and they work for the outreach that we need to hear. Again, one thing I would always say in city council is we will get you a response. It may not be the response that you like,
Mm-hmm.
but we will get it for you, right? And so I think that's one thing that has to be understood of, again, it's going back to that context of, yes, we did gather the information, but there are other factors outside that we need to look at and see if it still works. There might be master planning efforts. There might be other things down the pipeline that need to be able to work. So that's why it's not a one size fits all. Here's what everyone said. That's exactly what needs to be done. Again, surveys are a great tool. It helps us reach a lot more people than we may otherwise, but it can't be the only thing that is used for the department to make the decisions, right? It's not necessarily the direct democracy of this is yes, this is no, so the majority won. It provides the feedback, and then as a department, we use that feedback to work with our operations staff, with city council, with other stakeholders, and make sure that we're getting it correct.
Okay. Because I asked two things, I still am not sure if you are a specialist for the whole city, if you are a specialist for a region or area like the Northwest or Southwest, or,
So
I mean, who's in charge and how is it distributed? So people could say, oh, go to Jesus if you want information for X.
Well, so if you think of Laura and I as generalists of having to know a lot about the department, but very little about the department, right?
Mhm.
So we go wide, but not deep.
Okay.
Where if you have a question, but don't know where to start, you could contact either Laura or I
Okay, that's
and
the
say,
question.
hey, I don't even know where to start. Can you help me out? We would get you in contact with the correct person. There's also an East Side and West Side planner, and those are Ana Claudia. And even though I've known her for years, I don't like mangling her last name.
No.
And then there's Mallory on the East Side, and they
No, she's on the west side. Ana Claudia's on the east.
Ana Claudia's West Side, Mallory's East.
Okay, what is the dividing line there?
Kind of downtown, if you think of the Platte, and go kind of curve onto I-25.
Okay,
And downtown is its own special kind
Sure.
of section. But they are also great resources because they will go a lot deeper on the planning efforts, right? So if it's a specific planning effort, they may not be involved with that planning effort, but they will know directly who to contact with. And a lot of the times they're working with that project management team to say, hey, I work in that community, make sure that this stakeholder's involved. This is the way you want to contact with that community. And so they're there helping that additional project management team to be able to do an outreach effort. So that's what I would suggest. But again, Parks and Recreation is a very, very big department. So if it's a general question of, I don't even know where to start, this isn't really a planning question, might be a question about recreation. Definitely Laura she and I have known each other for a long time. Great person to work with. So it's something where we will follow up and get you in contact with the correct person.
so we need to email you on that. I mean, is that the best way? I don't know. So emailing you?
The email, you could give me a call. Currently, we're using cell phones. I'm happy to give my cell phone. If you'd like, I'll put it in the chat. That way,
Okay.
I'll put both my email and phone number in the chat. That way, people have it.
Okay. Perfect. And okay, so that was the one question. Oh, the other question was, and this is the thing, and then I won't belabor this anymore. In surveys, I think what is missing in surveys, but is often reported as, oh, we had 700 surveys in this meeting with 15, and et cetera, which makes one wonder, are the surveys the most important? Because you'll have 700 people who are in favor of dogs off leash, let's say, and et cetera. But there's also a place in there for comment instead of, I said other, but comment. And that generates thoughts for other people that somehow is not being shared. In my mind, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe on some place on the website or something, the others' comments are up there. The last I heard was there was a generalization of the comments, and they would sort of lump them into categories. Is that how it's presented?
So I don't want to get too much into the surveying simply because I am not a surveying expert, and it's
okay.
It's not something that I do. Okay. But again, one thing to understand is the surveys are used for different aspects. A great way of understanding is the Westwood Rec Center right now. So Westwood Rec Center, funded by the Elevate Bond project that we're working on currently. The initial survey is to get just some initial feedback from community members. Simply because there might be a majority that say, this is what we want. That's not what the rec center is. What we're using this particular survey for is to gather some initial feedback. And when there's a design firm on here into the project, we're able to provide that guidance of saying, here is what community members are asking for.
Okay.
Right? So in another project where maybe there's already been some more background information, there's an opportunity for more public meetings, things like that, then that might be on just another way for an outreach effort, but it doesn't simply tell the entire story. We try to use that entire toolbox depending on what we think is necessary and what the project management team, along with city council, feels is necessary for a particular project.
Okay, thank you very much. You know, if there's no other questions, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I think Greg Sorensen has a
Greg,
question.
please. I can't. Thank you. Thank you, Maggie. Greg.
Hi, Jesus. I put the question in chat. I think you can't answer it, but I would like to know who can tell us what the current budgets are for maintenance in Cheeseman Park. We had presented a number of proposals 2 or 3 years ago, and it was my understanding that they were incorporated into budgets, but nothing is being done, and I'm just curious about when that might happen.
Yeah, that's not something I'm too familiar with, Greg. Apologies. Unfortunately, let me see. I thought last time what I did, Greg, previously, Zoom did not allow you to copy and paste. So I just copy and pasted your comment. I will send that to our planning division that does the budgeting and see if this is something that is in the budget. I don't have your contact information. I do have Cindy's and Maggie's. Are you comfortable if I communicate through them?
That would be fine. I can also, I'll put in our Fans for Cheeseman Park website or email.
Okay.
Thank you. Jesus, I think we've sort of run out of time, and worrying about CIP is important, but perhaps we can have another meeting and have someone coming from Gordon Robinson or one of the people who did the presentation and talk a little bit about that. I think it's really important that the community is aware of what is going on, and PRAB members are good, but they don't always reach out with that information. And I think it's something, especially with the legacy fund from our taxes, that people are really curious about. So I'm gonna, maybe you can help me figure out who to contact, and we can email. If you could email that to me, I would really appreciate it.
For sure. And for those of you that legacy funding is just what we formerly called 2A funding that passed in 2018, right, which is the additional sales tax.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, because I can't see everybody, any other questions?
Well, before you wrap this up, I really want to thank you, Jesus.
Oh, yes.
We were spoiled to a large degree by Angela Cassis, and she did a wonderful job for us. And I hope that you'll come back and visit us on a frequent level, because I think this kind of information is good and is what largely drives people sometimes to come to these meetings, is to actually hear from the people who are working in Parks and Recs. So once again, thank you very much for coming.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. Apologies for taking your entire meeting, or at least I hope you get some business done. after I am
We
done.
will. And again, thank you so much. It's just wonderful. I really, really appreciate it.